So I'm Dan, and this is going to be very interactive. So if there's something that I say that you disagree with, hey, let's talk about it. I'm going to go through this and talk about some stories and things like that. As Scott mentioned, I've been working in the DFW area for quite some time. I actually owned a design firm, and I built websites, and my wife at the time said, "You build beautiful websites, but nobody comes to them." And so I thought, okay, and notice I said ex-wife. But so I got on Webmaster World, which is still in existence, and this is quite a few years back. And on there, I was asking some questions, and this guy named Bill Hartzer. Does anybody in here know Bill Hart? Okay, good. Bill said, "Hey, you look like you're in the DFW area. We're starting this new organization. Why don't you come to one of our meetings?" And so I came to the second meeting, and then I've been coming ever since. And I'm past president as well as on the board currently. Next Thursday, not the one tomorrow, or on August 9th, we're going to have a really cool meeting. If you want to attend, we're getting ready for the State of Search, and that is a 2-day conference in October. And what we're going to do is we've got most of the speakers lined up, but we want to get a couple more. And what we're doing is having a TED Talk-like presentation where if you wanted to present on something and then speak at the conference, you could do that. And so it's called 3-4-5. You have 3 slides, and you get to speak for 5 minutes, and then everybody at the meeting is going to vote, and then you possibly would be speaking at the State of Search. I love this little cartoon. We need a bullet point for a monthly, and then he says, leverage synergy across all technology platforms. And then, well, that's what you did last month. Well, it's a lifelong journey. And that's something that comes into play a lot. And one of the things and you'll see this at the end, I do a series called The Digital Hustle. And what I do is I ask people questions about digital marketing. And it is amazing how everybody in here works in digital marketing. And yet we all have a different definition of that. And sometimes when I go to networking events, the person sitting here will ask me, "What do you do?" And I go, "Digital marketing." And they go, "What is that?" And it's amazing that it's 2018 and there are business people running successful firms or businesses that have no clue about what that is. I don't know how they'll be in business in a couple of years. Then this person over here, I'll say, "What do you think? What do you do?" And I'll say, "Digital marketing." And they'll say, "Oh, do you do SEM, SEO, social, etc." So this person knows, this person doesn't, and it's amazing how that comes into play. But as Scott mentioned, I teach at SMU Cape. I also teach for the Search Engine Academy, Texas. And what's interesting with SMU Cape, most of my students are MBAs. And most of my students that are MBAs are clueless about digital marketing. And so getting them to understand what that is. And then that way, when they go out and find a job or work in a job, they're doing that. Past president of the DFWSEM, and then also I have a nonprofit, which is the Digital Career Center. And what that is right now, and Scott probably won't want to hear this, there are more jobs than there are people. And so what that means is that if there are people, heads of households that can't get out of that rat race, they're working, and I'm not knocking on Burger King or anything, but if you're working at Burger King, you're probably going to top out at $30,000 a year. Whereas if you get into digital marketing, you can start out and get an internship that pays just below that, and then your career can go on from there. So, if you've been out of college for a year, you're probably, making 80, 90 a year? I'm kidding.
I was like, oh.
Collectively, yes. But, and then I speak at conferences, and then I've had the pleasure of performing with Crystal doing comedy improv. And so I'm going to pitch comedy improv real quickly. When I first became an account director, I had not gone through doing improv. And it is interesting, and I would highly recommend that if you have the time, that you take a class, because it is amazing what you see. One, you learn a lot about yourself, but then the other thing is the whole basis of improv is yes and. And so you think about that from an account management perspective. When you're talking with a client, it's, yeah, there's a point where you want to, cap out what you're doing, but, hey, can we do this? Yes, and we can also do these things and that type of thing. But, so, would you tell, and I wrote this down thinking I could pronounce it here, but I probably won't be able to. Would you tell your doctor you need an encephalocardiogram or a abdominoplasty? When you go into your doctor, do you tell them, I need that? No. And so what gets me is how many clients say, we need, oh, okay, I took that slide out. We need SEO. Why? We need this. Why? And they think, okay, if I have this one thing, it's going to solve all my problems. But I know with Idea Grove that you are doing a whole host of things. And it's not just that one. It's not like you're a surgeon going in and cutting down. Now, I don't mean that you don't have the abilities to do that, but a client shouldn't come to you and say that. What happens when a client comes to you and says that type of thing, then typically they don't understand the whole landscape. And it's funny, I do a lot of SEO audits, and that's the first question is, oh, I did put on SEO syndrome. Hey, we need SEO. Do an audit. Okay. Well, then what I come back with, okay, your site's not that bad, and there's some technical things that need to be corrected. But what you're not doing, you're not posting enough content. You're not engaging with your audience. You're not doing things that come into play that will help grow your business. I love the Venn diagrams. So we have circles and diagrams, and in the middle, Venn diagrams. So if you can't do lunch, don't do the work. I am really big on getting to know my clients very, very well. And when I do that, I also want to be able to work with them and have not a personal relationship with them, but at least something where it bumps into that. And when you do that, then there's things that they keep in mind that they're going to want to do business with you. The fastest way to lose a client is not having that relationship. And when you don't have that relationship with just part of what you're doing, the biggest part of it, though, is delivering, high quality content and delivering results, doing things like that. And as soon as they can say, well, I can get this somewhere else, I can do that, then that comes into play. And having like I said, bumping into a personal relationship with them is good. And being able to go to lunch and be excited about whatever they're talking about is a good thing as well. And this will be fast because I'm hungry and you got food. So again, I love Venn diagrams. And what the purpose for this one is that we are all very expert in what we do. And we know that if we take this and we take this, we can create that. And that's where trust comes in. You want to be able to create a trust with your client. When the client comes to you and says, hey, our budget is, what are your recommendations? Right there, that's telling you they are making an investment in what you can do. They know that you're going to be able to deliver back that, something for their money. Somebody that doesn't trust you is they say, we have X amount, that should be, we need X services, again, getting back to that SEO, what will it cost? Okay, the value there is upside down. The value is what you bring to the table. The value is that you know what you're doing and that there are several things that come together to make it work. The value there is, hey, we know we're going to take your budget and we're going to spend this and you're going to get a return on that budget. And so just this mind thought about trust and distrust. You want to build trust with your client that you are the expert. The only thing you have that you can take away from them is your expertise. And you want to be able to have them where they understand that they are coming to you as a trusted advisor. That is a key phrase, is becoming a trusted advisor. And it's interesting, a lot of times, like I'll have a client come to me or a prospect come to me and say, I want an SEO audit because we need SEO. After I do the audit and I come back and I say, you need all of these things as well, or this is a small problem, here's your bigger problem, then that becomes trust.
How do you handle that particular situation, Dan?
Well, I hang up the phone. No. Yeah, I talk to them. I think that because, you know, let's stay with the SEO side of things. SEO has can still do a lot of benefit for companies. The problem is that there's a lot of snake oil salesmen out there that will sell SEO. Most of, I would say 90% of the clients that I get, they've had a bad experience with an SEO firm. And that bad experience then, that's where they get into this distrust. And so you counsel them, and that's what we have to think of ourselves as counselors, and how we are able to you know, talk to our clients and have them build that trust and do things like that. So you know, it's a very much a consultative sale. It's very much talking with them about what they're doing, how they're doing. I actually had a call before this where they had somebody working on their site for 18 months and they don't know what they did. And that just blows me away. It's interesting that, you know, the reporting that we give and things like that sometimes just kind of surfaces and doesn't get down inside what we're really doing to push the business. So I can't believe you haven't finished the thing I forgot to tell you before you start. So that I was on the Dart rail a while back. My wife and I overheard the guy sitting behind us, feel sorry for him, but he said he couldn't remember the last thing he forgot. And this kind of plays into that. So we're always being pushed by our client, and that's something that we have to do, and that's something that we, as you know, account service, as a people that, you know, an agency, that's what we provide. But what do the following have in common? An accountant, an attorney, a doctor. None of them are accessible easily. You have to go through hoops. You have to set up an appointment. You have to do that. And so this gets back to that previous slide where a client will call you up. Now, granted, there are times you are the trusted advisor and there may be a real issue that you need to help them with, and they need you right now. But the best way to instill trust, the best way to build is to have that, take away that accessibility. And we want to serve our clients, but on the other hand, we don't want to be run over by them. And for instance, when Scott mentioned that I was at Speakeasy, we had ServiceMaster was our client, and Terminix was one of the brands under ServiceMaster. And this kind of relates to what I'm about to say, but we had a situation where the Terminix employee had sprayed the wrong chemical at a resort, and the family that was visiting there, their child suffered from that and had to go into the hospital. It was on CNN and all the other places that you might go see news. And right then I had to call the client and say, we're shutting down all your social media because you have a crisis right here that is happening, and we can't be posting about how wonderful your yard looks or how your house is not filled with bugs and do things like that. So again, that's where I'm kind of turning the accessibility upside down, but then I'm acting as a trusted advisor. Again, love Venn diagram. So you've all probably seen the pick 3 things, pick 2. This is kind of a twist on that. So it gives you creative freedom. It pays well. What happens there? Prepare to lose a lot of sleep. Gives you creative freedom and gives you reasonable deadlines. What do? Passion will sustain for now. Yeah, okay. Then pays well and gives reasonable deadlines. Goodbye designer. Hello, Photoshop puppet. I had a client that we were developing there, or working on their website, and she said, I wanted to be pixel perfect. What are scare words? That's a scare word. Well, you know, what is a scare word that you hear from your clients sometimes? Can you have this tomorrow? When you know it takes a week? Yeah. Then that comes into play here.
Or how about previous agency did a lot more.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I know this is a short deadline, but.
Yeah, I know this. Somebody on here said, I know this is a short deadline, but. And yeah, you have to give way to those every once in a while. But and one thing that, you know, when you get the comment, my previous agency did this, all of a sudden now they are attaching what they had. And let's say that person, your contact, the previous agency was fired by somebody above, or they did a review and they came back. Well, then they're upset because they're not working with their friends. They probably became friends with their previous account person, and then now they're not. Whereas, you know, you should have the trust that whatever you're doing is the way that you know, the best thing that they need to do for their business. The client will long remember poor work versus a missed deadline. That long work, and this applies back in the old days when we used to put ink on paper and it would stay there. Because then if you made a mistake, that mistake is always there. Here in the digital world, we can go back and fix things most of the time. And so but because it's wrong, they'll remember that. Even if you're a day, 2 days, and you've prepared them along the way that we're working toward this deadline, but we're not going to make it, then these are things that come into play. But just remember, sloppy work will get you out of there as fast as anything. And my Achilles heel is spelling, so if I misspell anything in here, I apologize. How many, I guess you guys work with technology companies, and so is the IT department part of the marketing department? Do you ever want the IT department? Okay, no, you don't. Yeah. I was in a improv class, and me and another person, we did digital marketing, and this IT guy goes, "What do you do?" We're all introducing ourselves. "What do you do?" And I go, "Well, I do digital marketing." He goes, "Oh, I can do that." Yeah, right. Yeah. So the idea here is chief idea killer, VP of no's, VP of status quo, VP of stay the course, and director, then manager of new ideas. Of course, that's vacant. And it's interesting how a company needs and wants to grow, and everybody that's what they all need to do. But they need to do. But then you have this fiefdom called IT that says, okay, you have to follow these rules and regulations and rules and how we do things. I had a client, a Fortune 500 client, that if you wanted to make an update to the website, you had to plan that 6 weeks out. Now, in the world of social media, 6 weeks is a really long time. And so we kind of did the Kobayashi Maru. Anybody know what that means? Okay, there's one laugh. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So Captain Kirk is famous. He's on Star Trek, not Star Wars, but Star Trek, where he had to go through this school. And what happens is you have to solve this problem. Nobody's ever been able to solve the problem except for Captain Kirk. What Captain Kirk was, he said, okay, everybody was trying to hit the problem like this. And what happened was that's not the way to do it. He changed the game. He flipped it back upside down. And so those are things that you have to do. And the sad thing is that IT, because of the amount of money that is poured into IT, because of the importance of what IT does for the company, they do have a place at the table, and they do get interrupted, or they can interrupt a marketing flow of things. But part of what your job is to get them on your team, get them to understand why you're doing it. A lot of times they've not been told or counseled on why this is important. Heroes on a conference call, facilitator, timekeeper, scribe, and scapegoat. True everywhere, right? And then bad dad joke. Cost per lead is good, but what about cost per start? Okay. And then again, I love Venn diagrams. We broke something, you can't type that 404 page. So, have anybody been down to Deep Ellum, and there's the grate around where the trees are, like on Main Street? Some clever person, there was a tree missing, and put 404 error there. A geeky type of fun thing. So, real quick pitch, I do the Digital Hustle, which is where I talk to people. Y'all may know him, Dan here from HubSpot, and then some of the other folks about digital marketing, how they do what they do, and things like that. This guy is having a pretty good size video marketing conference coming up here in a couple weeks, and I would suggest if you have anybody that's interested in that, that's a good place to go. But I am Dan Sturdivant, and any questions, comments, great thoughts?
We have that same challenge with IT with a number of clients. Sometimes it has to do with the website. Them wanting to host it themselves, and we build a site, the Delta site, hand it over to them, and there's problems there, or going through them to make changes. That still exists at some companies today, which is kind of hard to believe. Overall, a lot of the walls have broken down some as marketing has kind of forced its way in. But what are some things that you're seeing now, or things that you would recommend? Because has been a real pain point with a number of clients.
Well, depending on the organization and their IT department, what a lot of companies I've been working with, the IT department also has UX involved in there. And that's kind of like a wedge into, and they're all inside. That's a wedge into marketing for that. Because you think about it, the UX is something that IT wants to control. And so if there's a UX person on board, then that's one way to go in and kind of get in that way. The other way is to show numbers. This is affecting your business by X amount of dollars each month because this has not been implemented. And you don't want to be confrontational or challenged because a lot of times these people, they have typically been with the company for a long time, especially if it's a technical company. They may be part of the C-suite, or their CIO they would be, or CTO they would be. But again, or at that level, they're also understanding what you're trying to do. A lot of times what IT people are is they look at you trying to bump in and take away, again, their fiefdom and how they can control things. And they see how marketing is, hey, we are all going 100 miles an hour in many different directions and things like that. Whereas IT is very plotting, step, 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 step. And anytime you bump into that, they don't like that. As well as if something breaks, it's their problem. And so they want to be able to do that. So, getting them on board early, finding out, where their challenges are and how you can work with them to do that. If they have a 6-week wait to get something on the site from a social media perspective, then maybe have a subdomain that you're managing and that fits in and fits with the brand and everything like that. What I've done twice now is built an online magazine that was sitting over here. That way we could add things to the site as we want. We managed, because, let me back up. Speakeasy was a joint effort between the Dallas Morning News and Slingshot. And we were basically the publisher for this one magazine that we would then be able to go and do anything we wanted to. And then we had to stick with their brand standards and things like that. But for the most part, we controlled the website. And in our contract, they could buy it for $1. So.
You speak a lot about digital magazines, right, as a format. We don't really do any of that for our clients. Curious about it.
Well, here's where they work. If your client is in a highly controlled environment, let's say they do insurance or they're some kind of financial services or something like that, or they're regulated in other ways, this is the way to have an arm's length relationship away from the client. And you think about, everybody's publishing outside of that and they can say what they want to say. But the client can't put that on their own blog, can't put things like that in there. And so what this digital magazine is, you have one advertiser on the magazine, and you have to be careful now because of the journalism aspect of that, and where it is, you have to be kind of in the middle and not pushing too hard. But for instance, with American Home Shield, we created home instructions. And home instructions, let me back up. American Home Shield is a insurance policy that if you own a home and an appliance breaks, then you call them up and they come out and fix it. For instance, a couple weeks ago, our water heater broke, so we called them up. They came out and replaced the water heater. And it only cost us a fraction of what it would have been to replace the whole thing. You have to pay for some labor and things like that. So home instructions, which is still live, but hasn't been updated in 2.5 years. But what that was a way for us to create content to talk about how to manage your home better. And if you can manage your home better, in other words, did you know that if you vacuum the back part of your refrigerator, that will extend the life of that refrigerator by 10 years. And if you do that once a season or twice a year, that will do that. And so that benefits American Home Shield because they're getting reduced calls, But it allows us to put in things as well as then the call to action, soft call to action would be, appliances occasionally break. It's good to have confidence that you will be able to replace that if you need it. But here's, 85% of it talking about, actually 90% of it talking about how to manage your home, and then 10% that call to action. So, and there's other things that come into play with social and things like that. So, yes.
So you talked about developing trusting relationships with the clients,
Yes.
kind of, getting beyond the transactional relationship of, I want you to do this, how much does it cost? Can you talk about ways you can build that with your clients, how you, like kind of practical steps that the team can take in getting the relationships more along the track of being seen as strategic?
Well, one would be how you present reports. And if you're reading off the numbers, then you are back at that transactional. But if you take every report and it can size it down, make it smaller, where it is think of it, you're doing a quarterly report, and you're talking about that at a high level. And typically, your peer or the person you're working with, they don't, we had 10,000 views last month, and we have 12,000 views this month. Hey, that all went out the door. But if you say, seasonally we've grown, that's what they want to hear. That's then when their boss comes back and says, how are we doing? Well, seasonally we've grown. They will repeat. They'll parrot what you said. So that's one thing. The other thing is knowing their industry. You will never know their business as well as they do. But you know what you do, and you know how you can benefit them. And there are things, especially in what we're in with digital marketing, there are things that are changing all the time. And there's new rules, there's new ways, there's new things that come into play. Keeping them advised on that is another way. And so, collectively, that might be something that y'all share with each other, and then how it relates to your client versus her client versus his client may be different, but it's something that you put in front of them.
That's really good advice about the reports, because I think sometimes we just think about report as a way to document work that we've done, and it's can become kind of a rote thing you do, and as opposed to seeing it as an opportunity to build value, credibility, to be seen as someone who is the best person to interpret.
Yes.
And that's a really good point. I don't think we've always done that. Sometimes we might just send a report sometimes, or are not. We spend a lot of time doing the work in the program, but that maybe preparing for that hour or that time you have to really show, to bring it all together, to show that expertise in a way that really cements that in the client's mind is a really good opportunity. That's good.
Yes. And knowing the seasonality comes into play, knowing, insights. We had a client that, why is traffic down? Well, it's not your season. It's supposed to go. And so we started reporting it differently, saying seasonally adjusted. Listen to a stock market report or a quarterly report and the language they use, and then apply that to what you do. And then that kind of gets back to what.
Kind of along those lines, I guess it's in the category of kind of leading your client versus letting them lead you.
Yes.
When a client comes to you wanting one thing, and you kind of diagnose the problem and identify they need to be doing these 5 other things, how do you pivot the conversation and kind of lead them in that direction?
Well, if it's a new client or a prospect, or you're trying to land that, or you have an engagement with them.
Yeah, maybe both scenarios, both for the prospect and also existing clients.
So with the prospect, it gets back to that we need SEO. You go in and you look at it and say, well, here's some things that you need, but where you're really hurting is over here. And having that broad, way of looking at things, and having that come back to them. They may not be, I pick on SEO because that's one thing everybody hears all the time. But that they don't know that, okay, well, social comes into play with here, and this is why, and that kind of. When it's a existing client, one thing, there's 2 things you have to be careful of. One is the fiefdoms that, finding out how is your peer compensated. And I don't mean like they make, $120,000 a year, but more that, okay, if they hit a certain goal, they get a bonus. And so that's going to tell you how they see things and why they may be going down this one path. And you as a counselor, you tell them, no, we need to go down this way. The other side of that is that the fiefdoms that we just talked about with IT and maybe product development and some things like that, they get in the way, but it's showing that wider thing. It may be that, I don't know how your accounts are arranged, but it could be that once a year you do a business audit, and you come in and you look at that, and again, it also depends on what their cadence is, and those things that play into that. But coming in and saying, hey, we've looked at your business, we've been doing great, here's what we've been doing, but we also know that you have further growth by doing these things over here. They love that, and then getting it tied back to their bonus would be something that would benefit them.
I like that you said that, we identified you have further growth in this area. Are there other key phrases that you found work really well in those same areas?
They all come out of my head, and
Okay.
you would, getting back to improv, that would be where that helps. Yeah. 'Cause everything I just told y'all is all made up. Any other questions? Well, good. Yeah, well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you.